This is a 2001 4Runner. I'm going to give you a total analysis of this vehicle so you can make the correct choice for yourself. Now, of course, the 4Runners just started out as a pickup truck. You can still see a little bit left in it. And then they became very popular SUVs. Now, the main problem that I see people having with buying a used 4Runner is people say they want too much money for them. They're just too expensive. But then expense is in the eye of the beholder. This guy bought this thing when it only had 19,000 miles on it in 2002 as a used vehicle. And as we can see as we go inside now, this baby has 386,000 miles on it. And take a listen to the engine as we start it up. Start right up even though it's cold. We'll put it in drive. Doesn't shake at all. Smooth as can be. If you put a blindfold on me, I couldn't tell you if this was a new truck or an old truck. That's how well built these things are. Now, granted, this one was made in Japan, but it certainly was well made in Japan. For people who are wondering what to buy, personally, for all-around vehicle, this setup is the best. As we look under the back, we can see it's classic rear-wheel drive. Big old axle in the back, rear-wheel drive. And check this out. The frame's solid as can be. The only rusty part? Hey, that's the add-on tow hitch. The original stuff is still solid. It's the add-on one that wasn't made as well as the Toyota product that's got rust, but that's just a covering, and it's superficial. That's still real solid metal. It's nothing to worry about. It's just cosmetic. And really, unless you spend your life crawling under your vehicle, do you really care what it looks like under there? As you look under the front, it is not a front-wheel drive vehicle. You can see there's no axle coming in the front. I'll shoot the other side so you can get a better view. There you can see there's no axle in there, although you can see there's a hole there. They can build them. You can add it on if you really wanted to go through a lot of use. But really, most people, they don't really need all-wheel drive. It's a good, stable vehicle with rear-wheel drive, unless you're one of those off-roaders, you live out in a mud hut somewhere with potholes and mud road. These are perfectly fine. The majority of my customers with them never take them off the street, so you're really kind of throwing your money away going all-wheel, four-wheel drive. Unless you live in a big snow belt and you're worried about that, then go right ahead. You'll find that these plain rear-wheel drive ones will cover most situations you're going to get into. And of course, realize less is better. If you're not going to use it, don't buy it. They cost more. You get worse gas mileage. Two-wheel drive ones are perfectly fine. Now, since all the 4Runners are made in Japan, yeah, they're not going to be cheap. Cost money to make good vehicles in Japan. 300-something thousand miles on this. Listen to the engine. Check it out. Now that it's idled down a little, solid engine. Still really quiet. The exhaust sounds perfect. Now you might say, oh, it's smoking. Oh, yeah, it's cold out today. That's condensation. It's gonna smoke when you start it when it's cold outside. People smoke too when it's cold. And some people say, look, water's coming out, something's wrong. No, in this case, absolutely nothing's wrong. When you burn gasoline, which is basically carbon and hydrogen, one of the byproducts is H2O, water vapor. All cars will give a certain amount of water off when you start them out first because they're letting water out, plus they have metal exhaust systems. When they cool down, they have a tendency of absorbing water vapor. When they heat, the water's got to come out somewhere. So that's normal. This thing doesn't lose coolant, doesn't have a blowing head gasket. You're going to see that on any car. And you're going to see the smoke when it's cold outside because it's cold. And the combination of the water vapor inside the exhaust and the hot exhaust, you're going to see smoke. Now, if you want a solid vehicle, these 4Runners are for you. They're still made with solid frames. So they're unlike any other SUV practically out there. They're still on a solid frame. Now, the 6-cylinder engine puts out 183 horsepower. It's not a racing machine, but it wasn't designed for that. It's a nice truck frame, very solid, reliable vehicle. 380,000 miles, whatever this thing has, it's a lot of miles to have it still running as good as it's running now. The new ones, of course, have a little bit more horsepower, but they're never meant to be speed demons. Therefore, reliability, and you can still tow stuff. This thing can tow up to 5,000 pounds. It's a basically truck turned into an SUV, and they kept it old style. And me, I like old style reliability, solid frames, never gonna come apart. These are vehicles that you could drive forever if you wanted to. If eventually the engine or transmission wears out, you can replace them. They sold so many of them. If you're like me, you go to a junkyard, buy a salvage one, you can get rebuilt ones, you can do whatever you want. But they do have a tendency of lasting so long that you really don't have to do much to them at all in most cases, except change the oil. And the only bad thing that ever happened to this was he took it to a Toyota dealer for an oil change and they wrecked the car, but they paid for the damage and fixed it all back up again. And that was years ago. It's still going perfectly fine. And that hilarious story just follows my philosophy entirely. Hey, learn to change your own oil. Do it in your driveway. Make sure it was done right. You got the right oil in it. And you don't have some young kid or real lead foot mechanic driving it around and smashing it up. And I mean, look at the quality of it. It's old, it's got a ton of miles. The paint and the finish is still in excellent shape. The Japanese care. And sure, if you look here, you can see a little fading, but that's not even the car's fault. Somebody left something square out here in the rain. You could buff it out if you really wanted to. So let's take it for a ride, see how it goes. Away we go. Nice stable handling. Now, this does bounce a little. I'll give you that. It's got the case of the bouncies. But I already knew that because I checked, and the front struts are leaking. They're all leaked out. Hey, you know, 380-something thousand miles. You expect to put struts on eventually. Now you notice you're plenty high enough in the air here. You got lots of clearance. Yet it's still stable. It doesn't feel like it's going to tip over like a cheaper made SUV does, with too much body roll. Now, as I said, it's no race car. Here we'll take off from a stop. I mean, it accelerates. It's nothing rocketing about it, but you hear how smooth that transmission still shifts. It still shifts like a dream with all this mileage. As all that this thing is, I would have no qualms at jumping in it, turning the keys, and driving the thing from Tennessee to California and back. At least after I put struts back on it, new ones. I'd like to have a little bit better handling if I'm driving all the way to California. And when you're just cruising around, hey, it's reasonably quiet. You know, let's face it, it's based on a truck chassis, but it's a reasonably quiet vehicle. Ride's quiet, the engine's quiet. It's just a big, heavy, nice riding, full frame SUV. Now, if you don't believe my analysis, let's see what the computer has to say. You can't hide from the computer data. Blah, blah, blah. We'll see what comes up. And we'll start the diagnosis. All right, it does good. The only code it has is the ABS system. Those things often break when the cars are that old. C1224, that there's no signal open or short. Now that code means that the right rear wheel speed sensor isn't giving anything out, so it's probably gone bad. A lot of guys will live without it. When they get this old, the ABS doesn't work all that great anyway, so it just reverts to non-ABS, normal braking, and this thing seems pretty fine to me. Driving it around and stopping, I have no problems. It doesn't pull. It stops nice and fast, doesn't have any problems. Now, since that was the only code, let's check live data. That gives you some really good idea what kind of shape the vehicle is in. And here we go. We'll go through the data. Now, for a car with that kind of gas mileage, the long-term fuel trim is only 0.82%. Some of them I'll see 15 or 20. That's hardly anything. It's subtracting just a tiny bit of fuel. And the short-term fuel trim, it's adding 2.3. That's kind of remarkable considering how old this vehicle is. I mean, look at the fuel trim. 99.15%, almost 100%. Pretty good for something with 380,000 miles on it. And if you remember from my other videos, if any of this data is orange, there's a problem. I don't see any orange yet. We look at the misfire counts. 0 across the board, 1 through 6. I don't feel any, and the computer just says Yes. And here we go again. Total fuel trim. 1.02. That's out of 1. So it's almost perfect. I gotta say, this whole 4Runner is in better shape than I am. Sure, I'm 67. I'm older than it is, but it does have 386,000 miles on it. I don't know how many miles I have on me, though. The odometer broke a long time ago. So now you know the truth about Toyota 4Runners and why, even though this is a 2001 with 386,000 miles, it's still an excellent vehicle. And in most cases, if somebody's trying to sell you a vehicle with 386,000 miles, people are going to say, you must be out of your mind to buy a vehicle with that kind of mileage. In this case, if you got a good enough price, you'd be out of your mind not to buy it. One of the most popular and perhaps the best built SUV that you can get for the money. This is the Lexus RX350. 2009. 11 years old, but under the hood, take a listen as I start it up. Still runs like a top and as smooth as can be. We'll turn that off. There, now it's even quieter. Then put it in gear. Look at this. No shaking, smooth as silk. And what does it have on it? 179,000 miles. And look at this. The short-term fuel is just 0.8. And then sometimes it's 0. When it's 0, that means it's running perfectly. It's not having to add or subtract fuel. I get some new cars that don't even go that good. When it's 0.8, that's 0.8 of 1% that it's adjusting, which is practically nothing. You don't have a problem until you get 20-25% off. This thing is just about as good as a brand new car, but it's 11 years old and has 179,000 miles on it. They don't give these things away. This one was originally $38,500. Still a reasonable amount of money back then. And it's not a race car. It's a beautiful SUV. Top speed's 114 miles an hour. My old Celica goes faster than that. But that's not what this SUV is about. Comfortable leather seats. Nice wood grain steering column. Lots of room in the back. This isn't some toy that has a tiny back seat. You can easily fit 3 people comfortably in the back seat of this thing. And yet it's still got a lot of trunk space. It's got the nice top so nobody can see what's inside. And you got room for all kinds of things. Plus, you flip these seats forward, man. You got all kinds of room for carrying stuff if necessary. They also have plenty of power if you want to tow something. But the main selling point, smooth engine and transmission. It's got an ultra reliable V6 engine. I've seen these things with 500,000 miles on them and they still have the original engine, head gasket, and the automatic transmissions are smooth as silk in these things. And the ride as you're going down the road is nice and cushy. Now for those fanatic people who really want more of a sports SUV, yeah, the Acuras do have better handling than these do. When it comes to an overall ride, put my rear end in one of these Lexuses, I'll get in a ride to California from Texas in a heartbeat. I wouldn't think twice. They are just so comfortable. Of course, being an '09, it's got old technology, it's got an MP3 player, and it's got a small screen, but hey, it's a Lexus. This stuff still works even though it's 11-year-old. My wife's 18-year-old Lexus. Everything still works on that too. It's got one of those 6 CD changers. They still work perfectly fine. Everything on it still works. From the cruise control to the security system that still works. Like this baby still has the original struts on it. And it rides fine. Contrary to what the dealer told my customer when he went there, tried to sell him all new struts for thousands of dollars, this car does not really need that done. That's how well made these things are. They can last and last. And yeah, you're gonna pay more for one. There's no doubting that. But if you amortize what you pay and how many years or decades you can drive these things, they're still a bargain. When you put together an ultra reliable Toyota V6 engine that puts out 270 horsepower with the extremely reliable 5-speed automatic Toyota transmission, last a long time, and get decent gas mileage for what they are. They're a heavy SUV. This particular one gets about 24 miles a gallon on a highway. Yeah, no great shakes today. For the ride and the luxury that you have, do you really care about a few miles per gallon? I don't. My wife's Lexus, it gets about the same. It gets about 24, 25 miles a gallon when you're driving it down a highway. It's the reliability and comfort that makes these things popular. You can drive 10 hours. I used to do that in other cars myself before I got my wife's Lexus. My neck used to get sore. My back would get sore. I'm driving, I tell my wife, hey, look, no more sore neck or back ever since we got you that Lexus. I can just drive and drive and drive. And I'm an old man. So you'd think I'd be falling apart as I get older and not be able to drive further than I used to. When you consider the relatively high price of these things, the RX series through history, they've sold over 2 million RXs at the price that they cost. Now, considering that Volkswagen sold millions of Beetles and they were cheap little cars, Toyota sold millions and millions and millions of Toyota Corollas, the fact that they sold millions of these things says volumes about how the vehicles are made, how long they last, and how much people actually like them. And yes, even if you follow Scotty's advice and buy a used one to save money, they still have extremely high resale values because they're so popular and they can last so long. There's nothing wrong with buying one of these things used if it's got 100,000 miles on it. I had a customer 5 years ago buy one with 100,000 miles. He's still driving it today. It's got 250,000 miles on it. Still has the original engine, the original transmission, the original air conditioning system. They're solid built vehicles. Now take this particular one, look, aha! It was made in Canada. Cambridge, Ontario, the same place my Lexus was made. You're gonna say, if you've been watching my videos, hey, Scotty always says buy Japanese cars that are made in Japan. Well, Canadians also make excellent cars. In Cambridge, Ontario for quite some time. I've seen no quality control problems with them whatsoever. Canadians know how to make cars. Heck, I had a Ford when I was a kid that I bought that was made in Oakville, Ontario. That thing ran and ran and ran. Canadians know how to make cars. People always like to have the Windsor V8 engines in their Ford Mustangs. Guess where they were made? Windsor, Ontario. That's why they called them Windsor V8s. And in the case of this Canadian-made Lexus RX350, the proof is in the pudding. This thing still runs like a clock. Customers had no real problems with the thing. And for an 11-year-old car, you know, it's dirty. We had a dust storm last night. It's still pretty sharp looking. For something that's 11 years old. Even the alloy wheels are still in pretty good shape. So when you drive one of these things around, you just feel solid and safe. Even an 11-year-old one that's got 179,000 miles on it. It's just so smooth. You come to the stop sign. Hey, are things shaking? No, they're not shaking, even in an old car like this. And yes, they're not race cars, but 270 horsepower. You step on the gas, hey, it isn't that slow. So now you know the truth about these RX350s. Lexus has sold quite a few of them, even though they're rather expensive. In this case, you actually do get what you pay for. Here's an 07 Acura RDX turbo all-wheel drive, top of the line. Well, this one's 13 years old, still runs like a charm. The Acura speed and handling is still Honda's pretty much legendary reliability, especially in the past. 13-year-old one like this. Now, they weren't giving these things away 13 years ago. This was a $37,000 car because it's a fully loaded one. But for that 37 grand, you got a lot. Check under the hood. It's got a 4-cylinder, intercooled, iVTEC, turbocharged engine that puts out 240 horsepower. Obviously, it's holding up. This baby doesn't burn oil. Still runs like a scalded ape, even though it's 13 years old. It's not that miserly on the gasoline. This particular one, if you drive it slow, gets about 18 in the city and 22 on a highway. Because yes, you pay for speed and for a reasonably large-sized vehicle. Now this is the fully loaded one, all-wheel drive. Check the interior out. Black one. Nice leather seats, 13 years old. They're still holding up. And check this out. The armrest isn't ripped yet. It's leather, but it's better than a lot of them. It's not ripped. And of course, being a Honda product, starts right up first time. This one's got a killer stereo system. Oh, the sat nav, everything. Automatic transmission that's pretty bulletproof on this model. Got the sunroof. Needs servicing, but that's what it's here for. I'm going to be doing that. And this baby's turbocharged, so it's got a turbo boost gauge on it. And as we check out the back seat, might help if we unlock it. And as we check out the back seats, got a reasonable amount of room. Now it is older and more bass, so you check out here. It doesn't have a special rear air conditioning unit in it. That's kind of a minus on this car. Killer stereo. There's more speakers back here. Even more inside here. Killer sound system. And lots of leg room. I got the front seat back the whole way, and there's still plenty of room back here. We get back outside. It's got a nice luggage rack on the top. We'll pop the trunk. It's got a reasonable sized trunk. Plus, being an SUV, you can pop the seats down and carry a reasonable amount of stuff in this thing. Also has nice dual exhaust. No, they really don't make enough noise for me. Now you can hear under the hood a little clicking. Well, it's kind of normal for these things as they age. It runs perfectly fine, but with over 100,000 miles on it, these Honda engines love to make a little bit of noise. This particular one, a lot of that is the injectors clicking a little bit, but let's see how it runs. Okay, we'll step on the gas. This thing gets up and goes. And even though it's 13 years old, corner's great. That's the thing about these Acuras. They're known for cornering. Stops on a dime, and being all-wheel drive, it's great in all kinds of weather. These things are pretty solid made. Still has the original struts all around. It doesn't ride bad at all with over 100,000 miles. These are solid built cars. You paid for them. They weren't giving them away. But a used one can be a pretty decent car if it was taken care of. Honda makes pretty good all-wheel drive system, and this thing is killer. Especially if you live in mountains or where it snows and rains a lot. You don't mind a high price. They're excellent vehicles. And it is the first turbocharged one that Acura made. But it's not a GDI, it's just a turbo. So it kicks in when you want to go fast, and it doesn't if you're not. It didn't cause that much excessive wear in this baby. It still doesn't burn any oil, and it's 13 years old. I can't say I go for the stupid wind deflector to keep bugs off the windshield. I mean, I think that kind of takes away from the look of the car. But when you consider the luxury of getting in one of these cars, you don't mind spending this kind of money. Hey, there's nothing wrong with one of these. And like I said, sure, they're not great on a gas mileage, but you don't buy a fast, racy little SUV and expect to get great gas mileage. That just doesn't happen. Even the rating systems here are a bit false. Because I have customers with late model cars that have 4-cylinder GDI turbos, and they may be rated high for gas mileage, but the way they drive them fast, they get just as poor, if not worse, gas mileage than this thing. Turbos theoretically get better gas mileage. You pump it all the time, make them spool up and spin fast and accelerate quickly, they're going to get bad gas mileage. That's just pure physics. So really, if you want a fast, great handling, mid-size SUV, there's nothing wrong with these Acuras. They are solid built cars. You don't mind the price. Now, my customer bought this used for his son. He was happy with the price, and it runs like a scalded ape, so he's totally happy with the car. Of course, he didn't fork out the $37,000 for it either. He's like me. You're going to learn the truth about Toyota Sequoias. This is an 07 Toyota Sequoia. Got the big V8 engine. Now it's only rear wheel drive. There's no front wheel drive on it. You don't need that with all this weight. Got plenty of traction. And as you can see inside, a lot of room in the front. Yeah, the leather seat's worn and torn a little. It's going to happen when I get to be this old. And we open the back door. And what do we find? The baby seat. There's plenty of room. Got the nice leather seats, and then more seating. And we're not talking about tiny. Look, there's leg room here. This thing has a lot of space. As we open the back, we'll get an even better view. We got a nice cargo space here. Then we got the third row seats. Now, of course, if you take the third row seats out, then you got even more room. And if you move those forward, you got even more room. Kind of like a truck, really. Got the original Toyota hitch on it for towing. And as we can see on the top, got a big old luggage rack. Now, when it was new, this baby was about $36,000. Now, my customer recently purchased it. He's going to export it to Africa. He paid about $5 grand for it. Pretty good price for a solid vehicle like this. But when we go inside, we'll check the mileage. It does have 184,000 miles on it. Now, I have seen them with 500,000 miles on them, so they can last a long time. Well, see how this baby starts up. Turn the key. Starts right up. Now back in the day it didn't come with much, so somebody stuck a Pioneer stereo in it, but it still got freezing cold air conditioning in it, nice cool air, big old sunroof, and check this out. It's even got an entertainment system on it. This was a top of the line vehicle when it was new. And being a Toyota, everything pretty much still works. It's older, so it's still got a pretty much utilitarian steering wheel. It's just got the cruise control, nothing else, and just the plain old interior. But I mean, look at the space, look at the design. This baby has a lot of space, and look at the leg room. And as we check here, look at this. It's got rear AC and heat controls too. This is a luxurious SUV. But it is 13 years old, so let's look at the data, okay? We got no trouble codes here, so let's look at the raw data, where they can't hide anything from you, at least for me. Here we go, live data. This is where the rubber meets the road. I can see what shape this vehicle actually is. I'm scrolling through, and so far everything looks pretty good, but we're gonna get pretty deep here. Short-term fuel trim. Each bank is pretty close to each other. They're just a little bit off. Something with this much mileage that's only subtracting a tiny amount of fuel like that and pretty much evenly to both cylinders is in excellent shape. From my experience with these, if somebody wanted to perform a full fuel injector cleaning service where I put my pressurized machine on, it would probably make the short-term fuel stop having to subtract stuff, because it would be spraying less fuel then. They all drip a little bit as they get a little bit aged. Now we look at the target air fuel ratio, 0.996. Now 1.0 is perfect, so it's pretty close to perfect for an old vehicle like this. And check out the variable valve timing. If you remember the Genesis I did a short time ago, they both were supposed to be 0, 0, and then when you look at what they were way off. It's still 0. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's perfect. As I showed on that Genesis at idle, the degrees were changing. They should remain at 0 when it's idling. This thing actually has more mileage than the Genesis had on it, by about 80,000 miles, yet it's still 0, perfect at idle. Shows that Toyota is making a much better engine than the Genesis has in it. We checked the misfire counts for them all 8 cylinders, they're all 0. That's perfect. So for such an old vehicle, it's in immaculate shape. Now let's check under the hood. And what do we have under here? Big old 4.7 liter V8 engine. But do realize this is a big, heavy vehicle. 13 miles a gallon in the city and about 15 miles a gallon on a highway. They are gas guzzlers. There's no ifs and buts about these things. Most of my customers that own them, they never check their gas mileage. I ask them, well, what kind of gas mileage are you going to say? It's got to be so bad, we don't even want to know. We just fill it up with gas all the time. But with the coming recession and oil prices going down, hey, gasoline's going to be cheaper for quite some time, it looks like. Now, being a Toyota, hey, they don't break down that often, but one big disadvantage of this V8 engine is they hide the starter way under there. You got to take the intake manifold, the top of the engine off to replace the starter. Bad design for sure, but I got my borescope out and looked at this. It still has the original starter on it. At some point in time, that'll have to be changed, and it's an expense because of that design. But it's not a reason not to buy a vehicle. The anti-lock braking system still works perfectly. Heck, it's still got the original radiator and it's not leaking. And look, here's something you won't even see today. The headlights are still clear. And the new ones, oh, they fade pretty fast. They even used to make the headlights better. These are plastic ones. The newer ones are cheaper. And as you can see under the front, coolers galore. Special coolers here. Got a coolant fan for the AC condenser. Got a big old fan for the engine. Huge. I got friends that live in deserts. They love these things. They don't overheat. They are made to take high temperatures and throw that heat out. Even the wheels are holding up. I mean, they ain't clean and they're dirty, but hey, front and back, they're still solid. A few hits on a curb, but you can polish that off if you want. Let's close the hood and take it for a spin. Solid hood too. Corner's pretty smooth. Yeah, it's a big truck, but step on the gas, see what happens. Now it has a big V8 engine, but it is heavy. It takes off, but you know, it's not a race car. You can go fast, but it's awful top heavy. I would not advise racing around in these things like a maniac on curves. Ride's good. Let's hit these big bumps in the road. See, I mean, it handles them pretty well. It is a truck after all. I mean, it's not going to ride like a Lexus, but it handles the bumps quite well, even with all this mileage on it. And look at this, 184,000 miles, still idles, no shaking. This is a quality giant SUV. There's no arguing that. Hello! It's got cavernous room here. It's a 2003 Honda Pilot, Honda's biggest SUV. Now superficially, you can see the chrome over here. That chrome fell off. It is here on the back, but on the other side, you can see that chrome fell off. Basically, that's just plastic crap anyways. It's not metal. You can hear it. Now, in this case, the owner isn't bothering to put it on. For one big reason, because he doesn't care. His brother gave him this vehicle when it had 80,000 miles. Now it's got 100 something on it. So he got the best deal on earth. But this Honda Pilot is not like the Trojan horse. It's not a free gift that you wish you'd never let into your castle. This thing's in immaculate shape. As we look inside, the leather seats are still in pretty good shape. It's got everything on it. Cruise control. Sunroof. All-wheel drive, you can turn on or off and even lock. Even a little bit of chrome that hasn't fallen off. And as we go into the back, a lot of room in these babies. He's got the seats down now because he wanted all this space. But the seats are quite comfortable. Big 3-row seats. And check it out. This isn't economy. This is a luxury vehicle. It's got the air conditioning, the heat, the cigarette lighter power outlet. Okay, the hood liner looks a little bit like a tent. But like I say, he doesn't care. And listen to the door when I shut it. That is a solid vehicle. And it's old school, so you gotta actually physically pull the handle. Look at all that room. This baby's got room for hauling stuff. There's no arguing that. This baby's a real people carrier. And as you can see down here, you can tow. And Honda had a pretty good idea who's buying these things. The towing rating is 3,500 pounds for a conventional trailer you're towing, but 4,500 pounds if you're towing a boat. You know, quite a few people buying some nice big vehicle like this are going to have a reasonable sized boat they want to tow. This thing can tow it fine because under the hood is an ultra reliable 3.5 liter variable valve timing Honda engine. It's 18 years old. It's got over 100,000 miles on it. It still doesn't burn a drop of oil. Honda knew how to make engines back in the day for sure. This baby doesn't have any of that modern gasoline direct injection turbocharger. It's a naturally aspirated engine that can last and last. This one's barely broken in. And then you might ask, what about the transmission? This has a 6-speed automatic transmission that is notorious for not having any problem. It's got rear wheel drive and it's got all-wheel drive if you want it. You can push buttons to use it when you want and just use 2-wheel drive when you don't. Because this is a big, heavy vehicle. If you use it in just the 2-wheel drive mode, you're lucky to get about 17 in town, and the max you're ever going to get is 22 on the highway. That's why the all-wheel drive system that you can turn on and off is better. You would lose a couple miles per gallon if you had an all-wheel drive system that was on all the time from the extra friction and the extra energy it takes to drive it all. It's a big, heavy vehicle, yes, and it's reasonably quick, but it's a gas hog, like all giant 3-row vehicles are, really. At least the ones that are going to last like this, and like the Toyota Sequoia. They're made to last. Listen to Scotty. Don't go out and buy one of those big ones. It's got a little bitty 4-cylinder engine with the turbo and GDI. Yeah, it can have 300-something horsepower, but it's not going to last over time pulling all that weight with a little bitty engine that has a turbo and GDI injection. This V6 puts out 240 horsepower. And yeah, it's no race car in a big vehicle like this, but it certainly gets down the road, especially once you're ready moving on a highway. You got to pass people. It's got plenty of passing power. I'll show you with a little ride. And like any Honda, you get in, turn the key. No surprises, starts right up because this baby's barely broken and it's got 105,000 miles on it. Idling, you can see we're at idle speed. You're gonna notice one thing. This is quiet and smooth. This is one quiet, smooth vehicle. You feel very comfortable and safe in a stable platform going down the road. And it is a Honda product, known for performance. For a big vehicle like this, it actually handles quite well. They've done a lot of tricks to the suspension on this thing to make it ride well. Now we got an open road. Let's see how it takes off. We got it in drive and we'll floor it. It moves the car back, shifts like a dream. can hear it runs good. Look at it idle. You take off. The transmission shifts like a dream. It may be 18 years old, but it sure doesn't feel it. Man, did he get one heck of a deal getting it from his brother for nothing. Absolutely free. Look at you, step on it. It just goes. Honda technology at its finest. You can cruise down the road in this thing all day. Your back won't get sore. It's nice and comfy. You're high enough up in the air that you feel really secure. And then when you have to corner, it's not sloshing around like some of these. It's got nice, tight Honda suspension. And brakes. Here we go, an idiot. And you can feel a few bumps going down the road. This thing still has the original struts on it. They've never been changed. But when you're driving, it doesn't feel bad. The cornering is excellent. You don't feel like you're losing control. Works great at higher speeds. It is one solid built, large, 3-row SUV. It's a Honda, so the AC still blows, cold as can be. I'm sure the fan's a little loud. It could do with a new motor, but hey, freezing cold AC in a vehicle the guy got for nothing that can run forever, just like the chrome plastic pieces that fell off, he doesn't care, he's living with the noise. Now odds are you're not gonna get a vehicle like this for nothing like my customer did. It's 18 years old. Get one with a low price, in good shape as this one is, you're getting one heck of a deal. I've seen these things with 300,000 miles on them and they're still going pretty good. This baby's only got a little bit over 100,000 miles. He got it for nothing when it had 80,000 miles on it. And you know what he's put into it? Nothing except for oil changes. That's a Honda for you. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.